Da ba da ba da ba da ba da do da ba da.
Recently, I've grown a bit of an appreciation for the GameCube, PS2, Dreamcast, and OG Xbox era of gaming. I can't really put my finger on why or when this happened, but the games released in this era just have a certain vibe to them that are unmatched compared to anything else. This probably comes from the fact that all major game companies were just doing wacky shit, and stuff you'd expect out of indie developers nowadays was just being pumped out by the biggest names in gaming. Katamari, Luigi's Mansion, Seaman, Shenmue, Chibi Robo, Tulip, SMT3, Cubivore, Metroid Prime, Killer 7, hell, even something like Super Smash Bros. Melee. All of these games weren't afraid to be weird and wacky and play around with really whatever they wanted to. At the very least, it's a lot more unique than what we've been getting nowadays from those same companies. Like, take a look at some of the heavy hitters on the PS2 and compare that to some of the heavy hitters on the PS5. There are no heavy hitters. The PS5 has no fucking games. I won't deny the obvious quality with the PS5's lineup, but for me at least, the PS2 just looks like it has a much more attractive lineup. Like, for example, if a game is mediocre nowadays, that's really all that can be said about it. Back then though, it felt like developers were a lot more open to experiment and do really whatever the fuck they wanted to. So even if a game may have missed the mark, you can still feel that passion and the love that was put into it and appreciate the game more for all of that. Even with Nintendo, who I will always believe to be one of the only big gaming studios out there still trying to do unique and fun things with their games, it kind of feels like they've lost a bit of that with this generation. And sure, I never grew up with the GameCube, so who am I to talk, but man, I'm sorry, a lot of the shit they were putting out back then was just so much more interesting than what they're doing now. And in my opinion, no other game exemplifies that more than Pikmin. I'm gonna make some enemies with this statement, but I don't care. Pikmin is the best game Nintendo has ever made, and probably ever will make. You could have just left a comment, man. I understand this may be a bit of a huge claim, especially if you compare it up to some of the other games in the series. And I know most Pikmin fans are probably mad at me already, so I'll scare them off completely real quick. Pikmin 2 sucks! Alright, now we can talk like adults. My first experience with the franchise admittedly is fairly recent. The first one I played was Pikmin 3 on the Switch. I always meant to get around to playing it on the Wii U, but unfortunately I was not able to procure a copy for myself until it got ported in 2020. But nonetheless, I played it and I really liked it, and from that point I made it a goal to play the other games in the series. That didn't happen until 2023. You know, I can remember exactly where I was when Pikmin 1 got revealed for the Switch. Almost like it was yesterday.
We have even more Pikmin news to share.
Is it a remake? Why, it's a remake! Hey guys, it's me. I'm Pikachu. I'm squatting in a real weird ray right now so I can fit in the fucking green screen. And I'm here to tell you right now that that's not me. That's not me. I don't know if I'm pointing the right way, but that's not me. And I wasn't there either. You wanna know where I was during that Nintendo Direct? Well, spit it out. Where the fuck were you? I don't know. I don't know. I have to go. I was in Italy with one of my friends watching the Nintendo Direct right off the coast of Capri. I was right here. This was actually pretty big news for me. I had been meaning to play 1 and 2 for a while beforehand. In fact, I modded my Wii U with the intention of those being some of the games that I'd be doing it for. But Nintendo did something super out of character and actually re-released their fucking games for once. So good job, Nintendo. You get people's money. Maybe consider doing that more often with some of your other games and you may even get some more money. Thankfully, that announcement was a shadow drop as well, so later that day, I bought it, and for the rest of my trip, it became the main thing I played in my downtime. Then 2 or 3 or 13 playthroughs later, I think it's safe to say it's one of my most favorite gaming experiences of all time. Pikmin 1 starts off in the middle of space, where we see Captain Olimar flying his spaceship through the cosmos. And he gets hit by a meteor and falls to Earth. You guys already know this shit. Very simple premise for the game. You get marooned on an alien planet and you have to get off of it as fast as you can, as Olimar's life support systems will only be able to keep him breathing and functional for 30 days. His ship's been destroyed, so you gotta find 30 ship parts in that amount of time. Well, okay, technically 25 parts are required, but the 5 optional parts aren't just any random 5 parts that you may find lying around. They're 5 specific parts, so that doesn't really matter. You should be going for 30. This is one of Nintendo's darker series, if you couldn't tell. Obviously, I'm not going to pretend like this game is Super Satan, but it's definitely on the weirder side, and that benefits it so much if you ask me. Like I said before, this is when Nintendo really tried to get weird and push the boundaries. And if what they've done with the future Pikmin games isn't a dead giveaway, they're probably never going to try and lean into this tone and the aura the original had. Because yeah, this game has a very specific atmosphere to it that the other games in the series don't really capture. And the time limit also helps really emphasize that tone. And needing to get 30 ship parts in 30 days is a big ask of the player. Maybe a little too big. I might just be a fucking pussy, but on my first playthrough, I was really stressing out about being able to make it in time. But now that I've played this game like 10 more times since then, yeah, I don't know what the fuck I was pissing and shitting over. This is not an issue at all.
Yeah, you know that guy right there? Yeah, his life is probably all together, and he's, probably a much suitable partner. But I can be Pikmin 1 in 11 days, so, sex with me, please?
Though the stress being there in the first place is necessary for the atmosphere. You're stuck on an alien world trying to escape, but also taking everything in, trying to make sense of what's going on around here, what the wildlife is like, the environment, the floor. But no, you only have 30 days to get this done. There's no time for dicking around. Even though the tension is there, if you just make the effort to get at least 1 part a day, you'll be fine. I think my first playthrough took me like 26 days to get it done, which admittedly isn't the greatest. But now I've honed my skills as a gamer, and I've got that down to a solid 11-day run. And man, that shit just feels so good. I understand that this isn't the biggest flex in the world, but I'm just gonna pretend that it is because it makes me feel better about myself. But man, that atmosphere is just fucking unmatched. I'm sorry I keep bringing it up. And I know it's not unique to this game because a lot of the other early GameCube games had that certain flair to them as well. But the biggest giveaway for the atmosphere is the Pikmin themselves. Man, these guys are just inherently interesting little characters. They're too weird looking to be considered cute, but they're too cute to be considered weird, if you get what I mean. They strike a perfect balance, and I really like that. Though this is pretty much exclusively with how Pikmin 1 presents these guys. If you look at any of the promotional material for this game compared to any of the other future games, they just look a lot weirder in this one. And while I do appreciate the more refined look in the newer games, there's just something about the way they look in this game that makes me like them a lot more. Speaking of the Pikmins themselves, these guys are your little minions who are gonna help you get back home. Ignore the fact that I just said Pikmins. I have an undiagnosed speech impediment. You have them fight and carry stuff for you by throwing them at your target, and there are 3 types: reds, yellows, and blues. All of these Pikmin have a specific niche they fill and a secondary attribute that makes them more useful in their own right. Except for blues, they just kind of do one thing, but that one thing is super important for progression, so it makes sense. In the other Pikmin games, it feels like there's 1 or 2 types that completely dominate the meta and make the others feel a lot less desirable or even completely worthless in some situations. Purples are unquestionably the best in 2, wings in 3, and ices and purples and glows in 4. And while I do think that there's a best and a worst type in this game as well, the gaps between them are a lot smaller, and like I said, since each one fills a specific niche, it never makes any of them feel completely useless. Reds have a 1.5x damage multiplier, which makes them the best in pretty much any combat scenario, and also they have an immunity to fire. While fire isn't a super common hazard in Pikmin 1, it's easily the most deadly, as in this game, fire can kill a Pikmin in like a 1.5 seconds. And this can make trying to traverse a certain area with a lot of fire a nightmare, pretty much making reds a necessity if you're trying to get in and out of there quickly. You have yellows, which I see a lot of slander for. They can be thrown higher than reds and blues, which makes them required for a few ship parts, but their more interesting ability is the ability to hold these bomb rocks. This initially seems weird, but from a game design standpoint, it makes sense as to why only these guys can hold the bomb rocks. Because if they only could be thrown higher, or they shared the bomb rock thing with the 2 other types, then they absolutely would be the worst. Anyways, the bomb rocks are... well, they're bombs. You need to use them to destroy these reinforced walls throughout the maps, but they can also be used in a variety of other useful ways, such as destroying regular walls in combat. Bombs make getting around and fighting things so much easier, and while they are a bit finicky to use, especially on the newer ports of the game, they just make things that would be a gigantic hassle normally so much easier. Though you are limited to how many you can use in one day, and you have to go out of your way to pick them up. But usually, it is worth it, because the work that they're able to get done makes up for the time spent needing to pick up the bombs. Then last, and well, kinda least, you have blues. I realize that, especially now, the flaws of blue Pikmin in really every game have been exemplified more than ever, and unfortunately I do agree with the masses on this one. Blues undoubtedly are the worst type here, simply because they don't have a secondary niche that they can fill outside of what they bring to the table, which is being able to traverse water. Now, don't get me wrong, this is a really good ability, seeing as you'll have to go across water to get a bunch of the ship parts, but outside of that, they don't really do anything else. Like, I guess they can save drowning Pikmin as well, but this is so rare that I'm not even sure I have footage of it happening. Like, for example, Reds have the fire immunity, which is super useful, but outside of that, they also have that boosted damage multiplier, which carries them beyond that. Yellows too. The fact that they can carry bombs and no other types can makes them useful for pretty much the entire game. I usually only have like 20 out at a time, but those 20 are able to get a lot of work done because of the bombs they can carry. And while on my own playthroughs, I normally prioritize blues over reds and yellows when I get them, but that's really only because by the time I'm primarily using blues, it's just to get all the stuff that's in the water, because it'd just be a waste of time to swap them out with reds. There's also just the fact that a lot of the parts that blues seem required for, you can get them with other types with very easy to pull off exploits. Like in the Forest of Hope, for example, when you first get here, you don't even have access to blues, but if you know what you're doing, you can get every single part here without blues, and it's not even difficult to do so, even the ones that you think would be. Now, obviously, you can't expect everyone who plays this game, especially on their first playthrough, to have all that knowledge, but once you do learn all that, it's pretty much just curtains for blues. They aren't terrible. Once again, being able to go over water, period, is just inherently a good ability, especially in Pikmin 1, because Pikmin 1 probably has the most water, and because of that, this is probably the best they are in the entire series, but they're still the worst type in this game. With all that bashing of the blue Pikmin out of the way, this is probably the most balanced Pikmin game in terms of type variety. And because you only have to worry about 3, it makes managing them a lot easier. You can have up to 100 Pikmin in your squad at once, and you have to command them to do stuff for you. Attacking creatures, breaking down walls, carrying back the ship parts. Probably should have mentioned this before I started bashing blues for being useless, but whatever. You really have to command them too, as they are fucking stupid in this game. The later games really spoil you. Going back to how they are in Pikmin 1 after playing the later games is enough to give you whiplash. Like the move! They're just constantly tripping, falling behind, doing shit they're not supposed to, killing themselves. Their AI is super fucking stupid, and while I've gotten used to it from my many playthroughs of this game, it's definitely still an issue. Like with the fact that blues, even though they clearly can go through water perfectly fine, just will not take shit through water, even if it will clearly be a lot more faster and efficient to do that.
It's okay, baby. You know I still love you.
While they can be pretty dumb, this isn't a super big issue for me, probably because I'm just so used to it now. And it's not like they just actively avoid listening to you or anything, but you do have to babysit them a lot more than you do in the newer games. It also makes Nectar way more important in this game, and Nectar basically makes Pikmin more powerful. They start out as Leaf Pikmin, then they become Bud Pikmin, and then finally, Flower Pikmin. The closer they are to that final stage, the better they become. It makes them faster, they're less likely to trip while walking, and it makes them stronger in combat too. But honestly, the most important attribute is that they get faster, and like I said, these fuckers are slow. The speed is a lot more worth it when you take into account the environments you'll be running around in, which I guess I should talk about now. There are 5 areas you'll have to go through throughout your adventure. However, only 3 of them are substantial levels. The other 2 are the tutorial area and the final boss arena. 3 areas sounds pretty small, because it is, but you have to remember, you only have 30 days to get all the ship parts. The 3 main areas let you plan out what you want to do in each day a lot easier, and that's not to mention how tightly designed all 3 areas are. You have the Forest of Hope, a grassy area that sort of functions as an extension to the tutorial area. It contains a bunch of bulborbs, bomb rocks, and no blues. They just can't catch a break. The Forest Navel actually does have blues, as well as fire up the ass. This is that area you'll need reds for if you want to get anything done. There's also walls literally everywhere, making destroying them with bomb rocks an absolute necessity if you don't want to have an aneurysm every time you have to go out scavenging for parts. Lastly, you have the Distant Spring, probably the most open map, especially so after you spent a lot of time fumbling around the navel. It has a lot of water, which pretty much forces you to use blues to get a lot of the ship parts, and that's also home to this guy. You can come and go between each one as you please, which I really like. The game is pretty open as far as how you can choose to go about each day. Each area is blocked off by a certain amount of parts needed, but once you do unlock them, you're free to tackle each area however you want. Something genius about the way each part is placed in each area is that pretty much all of them have their own mini challenges to overcome to get them. You never have any of them just laying there, bar a few. These all do vary greatly. Some of them are just destroy a wall or kill an enemy. However, some of them include you needing to traverse the environment, solve a puzzle with your Pikmin's specific attributes, or kill a boss. One of the best examples of this is in the Forest Navel, where you have to guide your blues and yellows through this fire field by swarming them around the wall, building out this bridge, building a geyser with the blues so you can throw your yellows up here to get the part, and then carrying the part away with reds. This single part requires all 3 of your Pikmin types, and while this is really the only part that takes advantage of all 3, you can see other challenges that take advantage of their traits. Actually, I lied. The final boss uses all 3 types. Now, this is a lot less clever than how the part I mentioned before uses them, especially considering that once you complete the puzzle, you can kind of just shelve blues for reds and yellows because the final boss is annoying and you want reds and yellows to kill it faster. As for fighting the other bosses, though I guess they aren't really bosses, as they just feel like normal enemies that are more powerful, I'm still gonna call them bosses, though, for consistency. You've got things like the burrowing Snagret, who pops out of the ground and eats your Pikmin, Puffstool, who runs around and can turn your Pikmin against you, Beady Longlegs, a giant spider-like fellow who you're encouraged to fight with yellows, as their throw height is able to reach their weak point a lot easier, and you have the armored cannon beetle that shoots boulders out that can crush your Pikmin. But by throwing one into his forehead vagina, you're able to stop such an activity. All of these fights reward you with a ship part, and most of them are locked behind walls or other areas that you have to traverse to get them. I really like that how all of these parts feel like little levels that you have to complete to get them. They're very similar to how the 3D Mario's like 64 are designed, now that I'm thinking about it. Just replace the parts with getting stars and yeah, they're pretty much designed in the same way. The thing that makes getting the ship parts interesting, however, is how the player will go about obtaining them. With 30 days to get 30 parts, you really have to try and make sure that every second matters, as you only have limited time to get everything done in one day. About 13 real-world minutes. Every single thing you choose to do in this time is an investment. Attacking and killing everything you see may yield better results later, as you have less things to worry about, but because of that, you're spending a lot of time killing things rather than carrying back the ship parts, which are your main goal. Let's say there's an enemy between you and a part. You could kill that enemy to make retrieving that part easier on yourself, but you could also choose not to kill it and just sneak past it and carry the part back regardless. Though, be advised, results may vary depending on the enemy you try to do this with. You've got the sheer grubs who will pop out of the ground and always seem to kill at least 1 or 2 of my Pikmin every time I get into a conflict with them. Wait, shit, that's racist. Wallyhops are probably some of the most deadly enemies in this game, especially when you compare to how bitch-made they are in Pikmin 2, 3, and 4. One jump, and they can pretty much eradicate your entire squad. In most situations, just killing them seems to be the most worthwhile strategy, but you can also just lure them away from any place of interest so you can focus on getting what you need. The swooping shitbug and the puffy blowhogs are, oh my god, they're the most fucking annoying enemies in this game. They can't kill Pikmin, thank god, but boy, do they make shit annoying. The swooping shitbug will grab Pikmin from your squad and bury them, which isn't quite preferable. And then the puffy blowhogs will blow air all over your Pikmin, which will knock them all over the place. This, as you may be able to infer, is insanely annoying, and both of these guys make the distance spraying 4% more of a hassle. Now, you'd probably want to kill them just to make your life easier, but because they can't kill Pikmin, intentionally at least, you very well may also not want to kill them, because these guys can be real time sinks if you choose to kill them. The way I'm talking about this may seem like it's overwhelming, but you don't have to play the game super tactically, though it does teach you to make these decisions on the fly, and I absolutely love it for that. Another way it does this is with multitasking. This is something baked into the core DNA of the franchise. It's the main reason why you see Dan Dory being pushed so hard in Pikmin 4's marketing. In this game, you're encouraged to leave your Pikmin doing one thing while you go off and do another thing. Basically, if you're trying to be as efficient as possible and you aren't doing anything, you're wasting time. It's always a good idea to split up your workflow so you can get as much done in one day. And while you don't have to play the game this way, it's definitely something you need to keep in mind if you want to get as much done as you can. Also, not only do you have to plan out how you want to tackle each area, you should plan out when as well, as the longer you take to beat the game, the harder each area will become. Enemies can respawn, new enemies will spawn in, like the swooping shitbugs and the Wallyhops in the Forest of Hope, and even exclusive bosses will spawn, like the Gulips and Mamuda in the fucking launch site or whatever it's called. And most infamously, the Smoky Prog. This guy's a fucking villain. Now, something else I think deserves a bit of credit is the atmosphere. I know I talked about it earlier, but we're gonna talk about it again. This is one of the most atmospheric Nintendo games ever made, though in all fairness, that tends to be the shtick with this franchise, though the tone of the atmosphere will drastically change depending on which one you're talking about. 1 and 2 have a completely different atmosphere from 3 and 4. And for the time, this game is really, really good looking, and it kind of functions as a technical showcase for the GameCube as well. You probably already know about the Mario 1 128 and the whole fucking 128 Mario's thing, how that paved the way for Pikmin, and how Pikmin was created because Miyamoto saw ants running around. Well, okay, that last bit isn't even fucking true, so you've been lied to. The original idea for Pikmin is actually completely different from what it is now, being a game where you just look at two little characters living their life like you were God or something. Viewing this game through the eyes of someone in 2001, though, man, this is a technical fucking marvel. It's stuff we overlook now, but for the time, having 100 characters on screen must have felt revolutionary. And this isn't the last time a Pikmin game proved to be a massive feat of programming and graphical fidelity, as you can see with Pikmin 3. I'm getting off track though. Pikmin 1 is truly just fantastic with it. Like I mentioned earlier in the video, the time limit really helps add a sense of stress to what you're doing, forcing you to have to get shit done quickly and not waste your time. Though when you're exploring an alien environment, it's kinda hard not to. What is this world? What is the wildlife all about? While these questions are answered in later games, or as well as this game can, answer them. And they also drive home the fact that the planet you're on is Earth and you're just a really small man running around. Pikmin 1 doesn't give you any of these answers and lets you think about what this world's all about, really making this game feel a lot more interesting, more so than the rest of the series.
Now, I know I'm making it out to seem like Pikmin 1 is the grandest thing ever, because it is, but there's a lot of jank-ass shit in this game that, unfortunately, you just can't really ignore.
I mentioned earlier that Pikmin can be really, really fucking stupid, but this game is also really janky in a lot of other aspects. I mean, I don't think devs intended for you to be able to get through the entirety of an area without needing to use blues. But it doesn't stop at exploits like that. I've had points where this could happen. I don't think the devs intended for that either. You can definitely tell at points that the game's programming is pretty shoddy. This is a strange comparison, but it almost feels jank in the same way that Pokemon Red and Blue feel jank, where, yeah, you'll always feel like something's off, but you won't completely notice it unless you really go looking for it. Most of the time. Though honestly, I kinda like the jank, though I realize I'm playing on the Switch version, which is probably the most stable one. I've seen some real loony shit happen in the Wii, and especially the original GameCube versions. But with how stable the Switch version is, I think it's easily the easiest version to recommend, and the easiest version for modern audiences to get a grasp on. Partly because it's like the only way for people to buy the game nowadays. The Switch version has pretty much everything you could want. The motion aiming from the Wii version, which I think makes Pikmin objectively better to play. Being able to aim separately from Olimar is a fucking godsend, and while the original GameCube control method works, this is just so much fucking... I'm sorry, it's just so much better. I hate to sound elitist, but it is better, okay? It just is. And it adds some of those modern quality of life features from the later games, like you always having at least one Pikmin to throw no matter what, and a much higher resolution. This version's pretty good.
Now, I am a pretty new Pikmin fan, all things considered, so I can't really comment on, like, the finer differences in some of the older versions. But for the most part, the Switch version's a pretty good port, and, it shows that they at least cared a decent amount with preserving the game.
I've been glazing Pikmin 1 pretty hard, and it may seem like I'm putting down the rest of the franchise a little too much, and I feel like I should say this now so my opinion doesn't get misconstrued or whatever. I don't think there's a bad Pikmin game. That matters. They're all fantastic games in their own right, but to me at least, there's no game in the series that hits the same as the first one. It is no coincidence that the best part of Pikmin 4 is just the part that lets you play Pikmin 1 again. No other game in the series hits the same gameplay loop as the first in the same way because they all try to do something different. Pikmin 2 is a lot more about going through dungeons and stuff, completely throwing out the ticking clock aspect. Pikmin 3 is very linear, and the juice system doesn't have the same sense of urgency as the cut and dry, get off the planet in 30 days system. And Pikmin 4 is a lot like Pikmin 2, but if Pikmin 2 was a good video game. Pikmin 1 is short, yes, you can beat it in like 2 hours if you know what you're doing, but I feel like that's a good thing. When you beat Pikmin 1, you're shown a leaderboard which encourages the player to go back and play the game again. Which is fair. If you're playing the game with the get a part a day philosophy, you're obviously going to be using up a lot of your time to get to the end. On subsequent playthroughs though, you're probably going to want to shave off as many days as you can, and that is what I love about Pikmin 1's gameplay loop. Your first playthrough is a stressful romp through a dangerous and mysterious environment, though through any future playthroughs, it becomes a game about optimizing your time and trying to get in and out as fast as you can. And while that's something you've probably been paying attention to in your first playthrough, after that playthrough, any stress that you may have originally had won't be there anymore, and learning the game inside and out is incredibly rewarding. I'm not joking when I say that I've played through this game 10 plus times, and I've gotten like 50 hours out of it, and I'm still not tired of it. Even though my first time playing the game was in June of 2023, it's probably my most replayed game ever, and this formula of getting shit done as fast as possible, to me at least, is Pikmin. Sure, all the other games in the series have this in some form, but they all do focus on other aspects as well, And yeah, people may prefer much bigger and much fuller games, because stacking Pikmin 1 against the other ones in the series, it's got nothing on the rest of them. But each game has little things that I think make them fall short. Not to knock any future Pikmin game down like they're terrible. They're all great games. Even Pikmin 2, which sucks. But there's nothing like the original for me, which, as far as I'm concerned, is the definitive Pikmin experience.
Now, despite how I may view the rest of the franchise, and I understand that's going to ruffle a few feathers, just judging by how the Pikmin fanbase is, I love this series so much, just regardless. And I fully respect Miyamoto and everyone at Nintendo for just not giving up on the franchise and trying to push so hard for its success. And I'm happy it has it now. It could be argued that Pikmin... Oh, what the fuck was that? Oh, shit. There's a bug on my head. It could be argued now that Pikmin's a household name like Mario, Zelda, Splatoon, Animal Crossing, all the other popular Nintendo franchises. And that just feels so fucking good, man. I'd love to talk about Pikmin again on this channel. I have stuff to say about the other games, but wholly depends on how well this video does. So if you liked it, leave a like, subscribe. I feel like a bitch, like, asking for that stuff, but you gotta do what you gotta do. I have like 600 subscribers. I'm trying, man. No, I'm trying real hard. We're gonna have to see how this video does before I consider talking about 2, 3, and 4. But as for this game, I really hope I did it justice. Pikmin is one of my favorite franchises ever, and Pikmin 1 is one of my favorite games ever made. I know I say that all the time, but I do mean it. Hell, on a good day, it could even be my favorite game. Who knows? I just wish I played this game a lot sooner in my life, you know? Pikmin was always a franchise that I had on my radar when I was younger, but I was a lot more focused on playing other games, and it's a bit unfortunate, because the Pikmin formula is inherently just so fucking fun, man. And this series, it's so good. And, yeah, that's all I can really say. Yeah. I'm gonna go inside now because there's a bee around, and I'm gonna get stung. I don't want to get stung. So yeah, goodbye. Thanks for watching, everybody. Cut to the outro.